Hi, it's Jared from Strong Roots Farm. Today we're going over the third thing I think you need to do before you start a farm, or understand before you start a farm or a garden. That's coming up now.
Hi, I'm Jared McGinnis. Thanks for joining me and my family on this adventure, where over the next 2 years, we're going to show you how to change an average subdivision home into a local, sustainable food source for you and your family. From market gardening to orchards, greenhouses, and water catchment systems, it's all right here on Strong Roots Farm.
All right, if you haven't watched, this is a 5-part series. If you haven't watched the step 1 and 2, go back and watch those. They're right next to this. I'm doing them in order. This is step 3. The third thing I think you need to be prepared for or think about before you start your garden or your farm is record keeping. So let's go over some of the things I think you need to think about and kind of how I think about my record keeping. So the first record that's pretty easy for everybody to do if you're a market gardener or even a homesteader who's looking to make sales is sales records. So you want to first know your customers. So it's very important to know your customers' names, their info. If you had an email for all of them and you had records of those where you could email them out notices, where you could link them to things. That's why I like YouTube, and I can pull customers in from YouTube and they can watch, keep up to date even if they're not coming to my farm. But if you should know your customers and you should know them by name. Customers will buy from you and continue to buy from you simply because you know their name at the farmer's market. So if you're looking at those avenues, you should think about that. If you can send them weekly, monthly emails, updated newsletters, things like that, that's a good way to stay in contact. So if they get out of the habit of purchasing from the farm, they lose interest in that, those emails is enough to really bring them back and to kind of keep them. Plus you're letting them know the new things that you have, all the new exciting things. Maybe you do a farm day, that's a good way to let them know. So recording your customers and the sales that they do. So maybe you say, hey, we've got a certain new product, but only certain customer. I don't have enough for everybody. Here's my top 10 customers. I'm going to offer it to them first. Understanding that. I used my Intuit or my accounting software. I would put everybody's name in there. And that way, when they came back to the farmer's market, they could swipe in. Another new thing that I've seen is a market card. And so you can buy these through Square or some other onlines. And so it's like buying a gift card, but to your farm. So you can collect some of that money up front. That helps you like a CSA would, but then they would use it at the farmer's market like a gift card, and you would offer some promotional value. So I've seen farmers do this. So for instance, you buy $100 market card, you would get $110 put on there. Or if you buy 200, you get 220, or 300, you get maybe 340 or 350, whatever it would be. It entices them to buy a large card one time a year at the beginning of the year, and then they could use that card at a farmer's market or your farm store or however you were going to sell your products, and your Intuit would keep track of your financials with that, and that way you could track it. The main thing I've learned if you're going to do this kind of a system is your system has to be able to track the balance of their cards. So for instance, if I buy a gift card to a local department store and I lose that card, it's like losing cash. You want to let your customers know, look, if you put $300 on this to help me start this year, if you lose it sometime or somebody steals your wallet or whatever, I can go in and see, hey, there's still $180 remaining. I'll just get you a new card. It's $1 charge for the new card, but I'll get you a new card, or maybe you comp that. And that's really the way I would handle that. But in knowing your customers, keeping track of their sales, and that's one way that I would track sales. The other thing is knowing which crops sold. So how much am I getting for each crop, and the profitability off of that, you need to be able to somehow measure that. And what's selling. Curtis Stone goes over the 80-20 rule, and I found that to be true. 80% of my profit came from 20% of my products. So you'll start saying, hey, this crop, I like it grew well, I was proficient, I liked the product, but really as far as sales, it was really only 0.5 or 1% of my sales this year at the farmer's market. That's probably not a crop you should continue to bring. So keeping good records of your sales is definitely one you should focus on. Another thing you should keep good records on is the growing. And so there's multiple ways to do this. I like to do it per bed, and that's really the way that a lot of market gardeners are going. So you can do it by square footage, you can do it by crop, but I try to think of it per bed. Is that bed, that square footage that I'm using for this vegetable, is it bringing a value, and what should that value be? And that's the way Curtis Stone does it with, he likes to think of it $800 per bed is kind of the minimum, sometimes $1,200. But you should think about that. How much is it worth putting green beans in this row if salad mix can make me 3 times the amount of money if you're on limited space? Now, if you have unlimited space, that's something else to think about. And so I kind of go midway. I'm not thinking just about profitability, but I am thinking about cost. And so for instance, I do not grow broccoli. Square footage wise, it's huge. It takes up a ton of space. Secondly, it's high labor. And then you end up with 1 head of broccoli, or broccoliettes if you can look at a crop like that. But you're looking at $2 to $4 depending on how much you would sell broccoli for. And I try to compete just a little bit higher than the local grocery store. So when I look at broccoli, it takes up a ton of square footage. If you're doing a CSA model or a U-pick model, you're probably gonna have to raise some of that because people like it. You're gonna raise some of these lower profitability crops, but you gotta think about that and keep good records. I keep records due to variety as well. So I will show you here at the end of this little clip a record sheet that I keep from each row. And so I'll harvest this variety of cucumber, go in and weigh it, and then I can compare those seeds. So I have 3 varieties of cucumbers. I think this year I can go in and say, well, this variety produced it per weight there. And then you'll go in and evaluate it on taste and evaluate it on the storage life. And there's other evaluations for which crop you should grow, pest resistance, all kinds of different things. But the cost or the profitability of it should be one of those factors, and you're only going to do that with good record keeping. The reason that I think record keeping is so important, and I probably keep more records than I should. I spend more time on record keeping than I should, but it's to constantly eval what I'm doing. So a constant evaluation of your product, of your farm, of your profitability, of your time, all those things should be important. Now, as a home grower, you kind of just think a little bit about it, and I would think mainly for home growing would just be my varieties, what worked well, and that can really be done on perception without weighing everything like I do. But as you grow in this and you're looking to make more profit, those evals for profitability are more important. But it's also to evaluate how you're doing. And I learned as a basketball coach, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So it's part of R&D as well. So are you getting better? Are you growing more? Can you be tighter on spacing? Can you be tighter on this? And so there's a lot of evaluations that go on, and that's another good reason to keep good records, is so you know, can I get tighter? It's not just money. Can I grow this better? Is this crop better than this crop? Those kind of things. The other thing I'm going to keep records on is dates and times, weights, those kind of things as far as seeding. So I use an app called Gardenize. I got it off the iPhone. Nobody's recommended this. I've never seen anybody else do this. This is my first year for it. You can look in the App Store for that. And I'll put a little note down in the show notes there. But the Gardenize app lets you put in rows. And so I just numbered my rows, 1 through whatever. And it lets me put in all my crops. And so I can seed. So when I seeded my trays a couple of nights ago, I seeded I have 1 row that's called trays. And so that just lets me know I seeded. So I put in seeding to trays this date. And then I'll go planted to a row this date. So they'll actually show up as 2 seedings of that crop. But I know when I'm seeding the trays, it just lets me know how long it went. And then when I can go back into that same tray and mark move to row 14 on this date. So I can see how long did it say in trays, and then how long was it in the row for, and evaluate. Johnny says it's 68 days. How many days was it for me? And put notes in there. We had a really bad storm, a windstorm that blew them over. We think that stunted them 4 days, or whatever it would be. So I'm keeping records on every row that way, and then I can put in the weights that I'm getting off on my scales. I can keep it all in this app, but I do record it in the field. So as I'm recording, and there are certain things that I will record piece counts, like squash. I know what size I want to harvest my gold zucchinis and my 1 ball and my green zucchinis. So I'll just put them as pieces. So I can sell them I sell them by the piece. So I'm going to count them by piece. If you're selling by weight, I'm going to count by weight, if that makes sense. So I use this little app, and that tracks my harvesting. It tracks my planting dates. It tracks my seed spacing. And so I'm going to put that in there. I put 5 rows of carrots. I put 7 rows of carrots. And this is the weight I got back. So I can evaluate when I did more rows, I got a higher yield, or when I did the same, less rows, I got the same amount of yield as doing more rows, so I'm wasting seed. Those are all things, important things to keep records of, and you can grow as a farmer by looking at your stats, and wintertime's a good time to evaluate that. The other thing you need to keep good records of is your expenses. And so you can pay yourself a check and do that. It's hard to track that. So most farmers don't pay themselves. Whatever the farm earns is what the farmer earns. And I tended to have a separate checking account for my family. And as I was selling vegetables and selling beef and things, I would pay myself off of that and write myself a check from one account to another. And I would keep track of that in my QuickBooks. Now, it gets hairy because do you give yourself a 1099? How do you do that tax-wise? And so I would just write checks from one account to the other, and then I would put it in QuickBooks under a sale of this, and then I knew on my P&L to take that out. So tax-wise, it was expenditures versus sales to other people, but if I paid myself for some things. And so that was really weird for some people because I charged my wife for our CSA. So that I kept it separate. We wanted to know, was the farm profitable, because I was working a job as well. So my wife paid $300. Not really. We moved $300 from my personal checking account that we make, our income checking account, and then I moved it into the farm checking account. And so we just put it in QuickBooks and let that know that that was a cost. Now, at the end of the year, before I did my taxes and printed my end of year P&L for taxes, I deleted that transaction. So I didn't look like I moved money from one account to another. I didn't want people to come back and audit and be like, why are you doing that? But that's the way I did it, to keep track, to see what the farm was making. So think about that a little bit, but you got to keep track of your expenses, keep good receipts. I like QuickBooks. It was $10 a month. Keep calling it Intuit. That's the other name for it. So, but QuickBooks was good. I can print out labeled and logoed spreadsheets and summary sheets and invoices for people as well. And so it was nice to be able to hit that P&L sheet from QuickBooks, go right to do my taxes, and that helped out. So that's record keeping. Legally, you have to do a little bit of that. So don't just throw everything into a shoebox and try to figure it out in March. So that's another thing you should keep records of and kind of evaluate that throughout the year. I appreciate you guys watching. We'll do a little recap here. Step 1 was educate yourself. We went over some books. We went over all those things that I think you should learn and read about and get you some base knowledge before you jump into this wholeheartedly. The second one was make a plan. So when you get some knowledge, make your plan and kind of set that plan in order and how you're going to do it. And then record keeping is the third one, because I think record keeping, for me at least, is a little bit of planning. So you don't know that you need to weigh vegetables until it's time to harvest them. So don't be making a spreadsheet that night before. Have all those things made up. Have whatever you're going to do to track. Have your systems in mind. That's part of planning. But record keeping has to be thought of ahead of time. And then as you're buying stuff prior to seeding, keep track of all that stuff. Go ahead and get QuickBooks. Go ahead and get you a logo. And so planning is part of that. So, and you can use, I'm not sponsored by QuickBooks or anything. You can use whatever you want to use. That's just what I use. I'm just letting you know what I use. So educate yourself, get a plan, and then step 3 today was keep good records.
As always, thanks for watching. Tell your mama and them. Subscribe and comment to continue with us on this journey. And don't forget to check out Noah Smith at noahsmithmusic.com.